Hello again. The narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. The narrative begins with Douglass explaining that he was born in Talbot County, Maryland, but did not know his birthday because such information was often kept from the slave, which was lamentable and bothersome to him throughout his life. He rarely saw his mother, and the identity of his father was unknown, although it was commonly assumed to be his first master, Captain Anthony. Anthony was a moderately wealthy slaveholder and was not particularly kind of conscientiousness. He rarely interfered when the overseer treated his slaves brutally. Anthony was declared and superintendent for Colonel Lloyd, one of Maryland's wealthiest slaveholders. His plantation home was known as the Gray House Farm, where Douglass resided when he was very young. Slaves received scanty allowances and had little time of their own. Many were also cruelly beaten by the overseers. However, slaves on the out-in farm spoke highly of Gray House Farm and considered it an honor to be sent there on errands. Douglass detailed the sumptuous garden of Colonel Lloyd's plantation and provided further information about the realities of slavery. He explained why slaves often praised their master. They were afraid that the whites to whom they were speaking would report their insolence and they would be punished. Douglass also wrote of the wild and unmanful beauty of the slave son and how they suggested the horror of slavery. Douglass did not have many attacks on Colonel Lloyd's plantation. He was often cold and hungry. Thankfully, it was announced one day that he, among several slave children, was chosen to live with Anthony's son-in-law's brother, who are in Baltimore. Douglass attributed his fortuitous event to divine intervention. He knew God meant for him to one day escape the bonds of servitude. Douglass' new mistress, Mr. R., was sweet and untouched by the destructive effect of slavery. She refused to treat him ill and even decided he would teach him how to read. Her husband, however, knowing the effect of teaching a slave to read intuitively, unmanageably, forbade her from doing so. Douglass decided he would teach himself how to read and write. This he did by learning from the Baltimore street boys and using the Outson's copybook to practice writing. Douglass attained a copy of Columbian Orator, which provided him with writings on emancipation and a denunciation of slavery. After Captain Anthony died, his assets, including of the slaves, were divided among two of his children. Thankfully, Douglass was able to remain with Master Hart, but this was short-lived. A quarrel between Hart and his brother Thomas resulted in Douglass being sent to live with Thomas instead. He was not sad to go, as dream and the realities of slavery had ruined Mr. and Mr. Hart out, respectively. But living with Master Thomas was not pleasant either. Thomas was ignoble, cowardly, cruel, and virulently hypocritical in his faith. He and Douglass did not have a good relationship, and the latter was sent to work on the farm of Edward Covey, the farm slave breaker, known for taming slaves. Living with Covey was the low point of Douglas' life. He was beaten frequently in the most unjust manner conceivable. He lost his desire to read and improve his intellect, and his spirit were broken. Kobe was a most abominable man. He was duplicitous, merciless, fickle, and capable of savage brutality. One day Douglas was very ill and could not complete his labor. This drew the attention of Kobe, who beat Douglas until he was nearly senseless. Douglas resolved to journey to Master Thomas and beg him to protect him against Kobe. Thomas was not amenable to this decision, and Douglas had to travel back to the farm. On this way, he stopped at the house of a wife of a fellow slave, Sandy. Sandy gave Douglas a special root and promised him that if he kept his root as his side, he would never be touched again by a slaveholder. Douglas was skeptical about took the root. Then he continued in New York and Baltimore doing speeches, how abolitionists about the slavery, reading books. He found many newspapers. He found an institution where wrote books, and so on. Douglas, as an example of the slavery, when he was working at the plantation, the slave of all the other farms received their monthly allowance of food and their yearly clothing. The men and women slaves received as their monthly allowance of food 8 pounds of pork, or its equivalent in fish, and 1 bushel of cornmeal. Their yearly clothing consisted of 2 coarse linen shirts, 1 pair of linen trousers like the shirts, 1 jacket, 1 pair of trousers for winter made of coarse negro cloth, 1 pair of stockings, and 1 pair of shoes, the whole of which could not have cost more than $7. The allowance of the slave children was given to their mothers, or the old woman having the care of them. The children, unable to work in the field, had neither shoes, stocking, jacket, nor trousers given to them. Their clothing consisted of 2 coarse linen shirts per year. When this failed them, they were naked until the next allowance day. Children from 7 to 10 years old of both sexes, all naked, might be seen at all seasons of the year. There were no beds given the slave unless 1 coarse blanket be considered such, and none but the men and women had this. This, however, is not considered a very great privation. They find less difficulty from the want of beds that was difficult for the slaves. They were lacking, I suppose, they were lacking water, they were lacking medicine, they were lacking clothes, as you can see, and they were cruelty, beaten. If the overseer see them, overseer was lashing them, and until they were dropping blood. That was terrible for the slave to take the situation on plantation or farms. Thank you very much.